Good evening, everybody. I had a unique request from somebody, one of our YouTube subscribers, to compare the 1980s XL600 to the 2020. This is 5 decades ago. 5 decades span the difference between these two bikes, and it kind of was a really worthy request. So I decided I'd honor it and bring the bikes out here, and I pulled some spec sheets off the internet to find out the differences. And what I was surprised is how close these bikes feel riding this 85 today and riding this 2018, which is the same as the 2020. This is my daily rider. When you close your eyes on this bike, it feels like the same motorcycle. Why? Well, come around this side, Junior, and I'll show you. The motors look pretty much identical. They're both radial 4-valve combustion chambers. They're both single cylinder, and I'll pull a spec sheet so I can tell you what the differences are.
I'll put these frame by frame so you can see them side by side.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So they're both air-cooled 4-stroke single cylinder, single overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder. This one has a black paint job. That one's silver. Cosmetically, when you stand back here and look at that, in many ways, the 85 is sharper than the 2020. I do like the red, white, and blue logo. And there's some ways that the 2020 is better than the 85. We'll get into that. But the actual performance of the motor is very similar. They're both air-cooled. The compression ratio on the 1985 is 9-to-1. The compression ratio on the 2020 is lower. It's 8.3-to-1. They both have solid-state ignitions. This one has, here's a major difference. This one has the primary kickstarter with automatic compression release, whereas the new bike is electric start only. So if you kill your battery in the desert, you're basically screwed. You're walking home if it stalls. So in some ways, having the Kickstarter is a little bit more reliable. Ironically, the 1985 is listed here as 45 horsepower at 6,500 RPM, whereas the 2020 has 43.6. And you'd ask yourself why. It's a little bit bigger compression. We'll get into that in a second, why I think. The torque is actually a little higher on the new one at 38.2. The old one is 36. I think the main reason why is this is a twin carburetor setup on this, and they're both stock, and the emissions wasn't as strict. That one's choked up a lot more stock from the factory. Obviously, we put an FFQ4 on it and opened up the intake and took some of the stuff that was corking it up off. So, but stock back to back. The new one is going to be more corked up. This has a dual carburetor setup, so this one was actually faster. These were very fast for their day. In fact, this bike right, this 1985 Enduro was capable of 100-mile-per-hour top speed on a bike that you could ride off-road, and it also would cruise all day long at 75 miles per hour. And some of the tests I read had it rated for up to 61 miles per gallon, which is pretty remarkable. The old bike has a 3.2-gallon tank. The brand new one has a 2.8-gallon tank. The quarter mile, standing quarter mile, one of the tests I had read, this was a high 13-second quarter mile. I didn't pull a quarter mile report on that one, but I would say it's similar. So this one here is flash red. I don't know the color of the new one. This is more of an orange red. So to the mechanical stuff, they're very similar. They both have leading axle front forks. The suspension travel on the new one, this is a significant area of difference right here. They're both 5-speed transmissions, but the engines are very, very similar. In fact, I think a lot of the parts may be interchangeable. You do have a 644cc engine versus a 590cc, 589cc. So you have about 50cc more on the new one, which makes up for the single carburetor and being a little more corked up, I think. So now that's it for the motors. They're very, very similar. The frames look very similar. Single down tube steel frames. They have a long travel leading axle front fork. It's a conventional fork, i.e. it's not an upside down fork. Now the 85 is sitting lower to the ground because it has 9 inches of suspension travel versus almost 12, 11.6 on the new one. So you have better suspension on the new one. It's also a bigger, wider, thicker fork on the new one, so it's going to flex a little bit less. Ironically, the front brakes are the same. They're both single 240 millimeter disc, 2-piston calipers, so the brake system in 5 decades didn't change. It really tells you how good Honda had it back in 1985. They're both 21-inch front tires. Moving to the rear, they're both ProLink Honda single shock rear suspensions with Showa shocks. I do believe they're Showa. The rear tire on this one is a 17. The new one has an 18-inch tire. The wheelbase is 55.9 on the old bike. It's 53.3 on the new one, so a little bit shorter wheelbase on the new bike. The seat height, this is a pretty remarkable difference. This one's 33.8. You can see that one towers over this one with a 37-inch inseam. So even taller guys sometimes feel like they're, could use a little lower seat height. So this had a little bit lower seat height, a little bit lower center of gravity. 17 versus 18-inch rear wheel. The ground clearance on the new one is 2.2 inches more than this one. It's 13 inches versus 10.8. And the dry weight on the new bike actually ballooned up to 324 pounds from 295 on this one.
That's significant.
Yeah, it's 25 pounds heavier. Why? Well, it's got the emissions on it. It's got the electric starter. It's got the battery on it. Some of the thicker front forks weigh more. So all those things add up to an additional almost 30 pounds. So a little bit smaller gas tank on that one, 2.8 versus 3.2. I would guess the fuel consumption would be about the same. So pretty remarkable. The amount of things that are similar, mainly the engines are very similar. You get a disc brake on the new one. The old one has a drum rear brake. So, but riding them really surprised me how good this bike was. I took Jordan, my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, for a ride on this. The combined weight were probably 350 pounds. And this thing hauls the mail, even with 2 big people on it. So this one's been upgraded with a nice set of Dunlop DOT-approved tires, which have a little bit more of an off-road bias. These bikes have won multiple Baja races, Enduro races. Very similar model to the 650, the XR600, actually won multiple national championships with Scott Summers on it. So there you have it. One of the ads Honda has says it makes you king of the mountain or king of the road, and that's really true. You can ride these off-road or on the street. So Kenny, is there anything you'd like to add about what you've seen between these two? The gauge packages, the original gauges, check out the gauge packages. They're very similar. I'm not sure the new one is an improvement. I'll say it's different. The letters are bigger on this one. This is from the Mike Bressler collection. Mike's one of our good friends out of New Jersey, and he has had this bike since, well, he's had it titled under his name for 8 years. So
we should say it's been in the family for what? Maybe Mike can tell us. For a very long time.
Yeah, I don't know if Mike bought it from his brother, but this thing is absolutely pristine, and it is a really sharp bike, especially with the red, white, and blue tank badges or decals, the gold chain. We've done quite a bit of work to this bike since we got it from Mike. We actually took the engine out of the frame. We'll get into that later. This is mainly about the comparison of the two, but the engine's been fully restored with all new head gasket, base gaskets, all the gaskets on it. It's like a brand new motorcycle. The aluminum forks have been polished. It's been primed and primed from top to bottom, and it's stunning. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a nicer one anywhere in the world unless you found one new in a crate. So it's completely sorted out. But in any event, back to the two bikes. In some ways, the new bike with the silver engine and frame looks a little washed out compared to the old one. They've been running pretty much the same motorcycle for over 10 years, 20 years probably. The 650L hasn't changed because it's such a great bike. So there you have it, folks. That's my take on the differences. They were kick-ass motorcycles in '85. Hey, let's face it, I own a bike shop, right? I have a KTM 1190 in there. I've got a KLR 650. I've got an XR 650. I could ride any bike I want. When it comes down to single cylinder or enduros of any types, I've selected the 650 single cylinder as my favorite all-around bike, and I ride 2-up with Christy all the time. So it's nice having enough power. You can get on the highway. If you're down in Daytona, you want to go to get on the highway to go for a nice ride. You can go 75, 85 miles an hour with the traffic on a 650, where the 250 I had didn't have enough power. The new bike's awesome, totally bulletproof. Yes, there are faster, better suspended enduros. You could buy a KTM or something like that, but there's something about the vintage Honda motor. It's been around for 5 decades. They're totally proven. They're bulletproof. They're both fantastic bikes. So if you're thinking about buying an enduro, in my opinion, you cannot go wrong with the Kawasaki KLR650 or the Honda XR. You can spend more money and get something a little fancier, newer, KTM, Husqvarna, whatever. But I just dig these honest to goodness bulletproof thumpers. The single cylinder 4-strokes are a lot of fun. So thanks for watching. That's my 2 cents. And as always, God bless America.